Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, details remain more unclear than ever when it comes to who's behind the devastating blazes that have rampaged across northern Israel. The Israeli defense minister urges the Trump administration to pursue a common vision with Israel in the Middle East, and tensions remain higher than ever over the Amona settlement outpost. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. Israeli officials are still looking into the cause of the devastating wave of fires that swept Israel last month, but the head of the investigation is now seeking to downplay claims that the blaze were started intentionally. Aaron, you've been keeping track of what's been happening behind the scenes. Tell us about that.
It's really a complicated issue. It's not black and white. We've been reporting, and pretty much everybody else has been reporting that as this is going on, more and more people have been claiming arson, and that's we're learning now that it's not so clear cut. Yeah.
So, do we have the right to be blaming anyone right now?
It's a dangerous thing to point fingers, but yeah, let's take a look.
Over the course of the fires, politicians have been blaming the devastation on arson terrorism. But Chief Fire Investigator Herzl Aharon says that the truth is that nobody knows anything. Last Thursday, police claimed that 29 out of 29 of the most serious fires were being treated as arson or suspected arson, and earlier in the week, 35 people were arrested on suspicion of causing the fires. Even Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan said that 40 to 50% of the blazes were most likely started on purpose. Now, Israel's Channel 2 News says that just 10 people are still in custody for suspected arson, and only 2 indictments have been filed. There aren't even any suspects in the largest and most dangerous fires of Haifa and Zichron Yaakov. For now, experts in counterterrorism are urging the public to wait before pointing fingers.
As Israel scrambles to prepare for a Trump presidency, Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is expressing hope for a common vision between Israel and the United States when it comes to the future of the Middle East. And most of all, he's urging the incoming Trump administration not to adopt a policy of isolationism.
We need strong America. We need America active in, at least in our region. And I hope that we will really achieve we will agree about the common vision regarding future of the Middle East.
Lieberman made his remarks at the Saban Forum, which is an annual dialogue held between American and Israeli leaders from across a political and social spectrum. For now, he's advising patience until Trump takes office in January.
My proposal is to wait for the new administration and to create, together with new administration, a common policy. Not, without any surprise, and not to create some facts, but to wait and to discuss with the next administration our policy and our visions.
Lieberman is welcoming the possibility of President-elect Donald Trump's Jewish son-in-law as peacemaker in the Middle East. Jared Kushner was one of the most important voices in Trump's campaign from the beginning, and has been involved in almost every aspect of Trump's campaign. His Jewish identity has been celebrated by Jews and Israelis alike, who believe he will provide a source of support to the Jewish state throughout Trump's presidency. Among many other promises regarding Israel throughout the president-elect's campaign, Trump has vowed to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. But the Israeli defense minister says that while he hopes such a promise will come to pass, we'll just have to wait and see. Speaking of other U.S.-related issues, the Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is also expressing Israel's support for the U.S. Senate's latest move to unanimously approve the extension of the Iran Sanctions Act for another 10 years. He says the Islamic Republic has already violated last year's agreement with the international community for its ongoing ballistic missile testing and state sponsorship of regional terror. And Jerusalem's view is certainly shared by key Washington lawmakers.
Since the nuclear agreement came into force, Iran has continued its efforts to destabilize the region and increase its power through proxy and terrorist networks. Since we signed the nuclear agreement with Iran, Iran has been testing the agreement, testing our resolve, and quite literally testing long-range ballistic missiles.
Senator Menendez told his fellow senators that the United States needs to send a signal that it will respond to any provocations from Iran. And the 99-0 vote did just that by adding another decade to the ISA, which first passed in 1996. Its set of existing sanctions are aimed at punishing any investments in Iran's energy industry to deter the country's pursuit of nuclear weapons. Congress already approved the extension last month, and now both houses expect sitting President Barack Obama to sign on before the current ISA expires at the end of 2016.
So, Mr. President, we must provide leverage to seek necessary change in the conduct of the Iranian regime and hold Iran accountable for meeting its international obligations, including the terms of the JCPOA. We will improve the deplorable human rights situation in Iran and double down on our reassurances to Israel and American allies in the region of our full commitment to regional security.
Congressional aides say they expect Obama will sign the bill when it reaches his desk. Now, returning to Israel's regulation bill on Amona, as the clock ticks down towards tomorrow's critical vote on the divisive issue, efforts to reach a compromise are so far failing to yield results. There's already been a lot of drama today, starting when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu kicked a member of the Jewish Home Party out of a meeting in his office for questioning the Prime Minister's commitment to right-wing policy. The gathering was actually a carryover from last night between Netanyahu and the Attorney General and members of the Jewish Home faction, which presented the contentious bill. The cabinet is divided on the measure, which seeks to grant retroactive approval of several West Bank settlements built illegally on privately owned Palestinian land. But Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon is opposed to the clause including Amona, and his Kulanu party is large enough to guarantee the plan won't pass if its 10 members aren't on board. So everyone's meeting in efforts to negotiate a solution which for now continues to be elusive. The reason it's so urgent at this point is because the December 25th date for Amona's destruction, as ordered by the High Court, is rapidly approaching. The Israeli defense chief says he'd like to see the Knesset postpone its controversial vote on the outpost regulation bill that's slated for tomorrow, until after the inauguration of American President-elect Donald Trump.
And I think it makes sense because, the reasons that we freeze and de facto, our construction activity in Judea and Samaria, in Jerusalem, it's really, I'm personally not satisfied. And the main reason it's not because we really don't want to build new homes in Judea and Samaria or in Jerusalem, because we had disagreements with American administration, and I think it's clear for us, for me at least, that key to the future of the settlements, it's understandings with United States, not only our desire. We're not in a vacuum. And I think the last 8 years, it was a huge problem. It was one of the main points of disagreements between us and the current administration.
Joining me now to discuss the settlement bill, the proposed legislation which would retroactively protect outpost settlements on private Palestinian land, is Simcha Rothman, legal advisor of the Israeli Movement for Governability and Democracy. Thanks so much for coming in. All right, so to begin, the settlement bill passed the first of 3 Knesset readings, but now it's in trouble. What changed from before?
And the problem, it's mostly political problem. It's not a legal problem, and we usually don't. We lawyers try not to deal with the political problem so much. But the problem, basically, that Kachlan and Kulanu party said they don't want to pass a bill that they feel interfere with the Supreme Court or have some clash with its ruling. So basically, that's the issue. But there are deeper political problems that I'm probably not aware of.
Right, and I mean, they would need the support of the Kulanu party for this to be passed, right? Because it's 10 members.
Yeah, it's an important part of the coalition in Israel, so you need them.
So the bill's been proposed in two different versions. What exactly are the differences between them?
Basically, there are two paragraphs of the proposed bill, 7 and 10, that's the retroactive part, because the law as a whole, it tried to deal with the problems that arise all over Judea and Samaria and try to figure out how to solve those issues. 7 and 10 chapters are retroactive. They say even places that are already being discussed in the Supreme Court decision or in any other court decision, the process and the ruining of the settlement will be postponed until we figure out how to work the new law.
Right.
So that's the chapter 7 and 10.
And that's a difference with the other version. Now, how can the Knesset legislate over land that's outside of Israeli borders?
Knesset does that all the time. It's not a new issue. Basically, the same law that applies in Gilo is outside of the borders of Israel as the world recognizes it. The law about the Golan, who applies the Israeli law on the Golan, is also not approved by any other country, and the Knesset does that, and the Israeli courts recognize that. Also, there are other laws that apply in Judea and Samaria as today. We pay taxes, the people are living there go to the army, all kind of laws that apply to the area in Judea and Samaria, and we live with it. That's the situation. That's basically what you get when you are holding a piece of land for almost 50 years. So the legislation in Judea and Samaria is a mix of an Israeli legislation, an old Jordanian legislation, and British legislation.
Lots of international input.
That's the issue.
Right. Now, if this law passes with Chapter 7 and 10 included, the two chapters that you mentioned before, is this a legal issue or a political one?
Basically, it's a political issue. All the legal claims, there are legal claims, but you can solve them. You can solve them if you want. But the feeling that we get, and I sat in all the meetings in the Knesset, the feeling that the people sitting in the committee get from the government, from the chief legal advisor for the government, that he does not want to solve the problems. He wants to raise the problems and stop the law, and the reason, we believe, is political and not legal. For example, the retroactive issue, to say that the Knesset cannot cancel a ruling of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Aaron Barak himself said that it's a possibility. He said it in 2006 when he left the court. He said that yesterday in a convention held in Zichron Yaakov. He said that that's not an issue. It's a non-issue, the retroactive. If the Knesset feels that the ruling of the Supreme Court makes no justice, in this case, that's her job to solve the problem. And that's what's happening. That people say it's a legal problem, and it's a political. And the Kulanu and Kachlan does not want it, not because of the legal problem, but because some political pressure applied on them.
Well, doesn't that kind of create a slippery slope when it comes to implementing law?
It might, but again, that's why we elect our representative in the Knesset. Because we want, it's not easy to go against a ruling, but when the Knesset recognizes a problem and we elect them to find us the solutions, and it happened many times before. Like for example,
can you give us some examples?
For example, in it's very famous, and basically that was the first, almost the first ruling when the court upheld a law that contradicted the basic law. When the Knesset settled the laws for the kibbutzim was owed tons of money to banks and to private people, and the Knesset saw that all the settlements, this time settlements, the places all in the north and in the Negev are in danger, and people who live there, they don't have money to pay the debts. So even though they have a verdict, they need to pay. Even though some people already started paying, the Knesset passed a law, and even people that already got the money was forced by this law to bring it back. So when you find a problem that needs a major change in the legal paradigm, so you need to do it, and it happened. It happened many times. And this is just the easy example. It happened. All the laws we have safeguarding it's Chok Haganat HaDayar to when you have protected rent. That happened after you signed an agreement. You have a verdict to evict someone, and then the Knesset passed a law, and the people stayed in those apartments for many years. It happened.
So there are lots of examples. Now, do you think that this legislation, in any of its version, has an actual chance of passing? And if it does, what are the consequences that we're going to see?
Again, chances are a political question. I know I can speak from what I saw, but it's really, I'm not a political advisor. I don't know the chances. I know that in the Israeli regime, if a strong if a big part of the coalition wants something, especially this time when the budget is supposed to be brought to the Knesset, he gets what he wants, and it's a political issue. If they will apply enough pressure, they will get what they want. But what happens if it will pass? That's the big question, because the law says specifically, if it passes with Chapter 7 and 10, that Amona should not be destroyed. It says it specifically. The question is, how will the chief legal advisor, Attorney General Mandelblit, how he will interpret the law, how he will enact, and if the law will go against and again, and someone will appeal to the Supreme Court that this law is unconstitutional, what will be the situation in the meantime? That's for the next chapter.
And what will the world think of
What the world think is also a very important question, but the same, and that was said also many times in the committee discussing this law. The world thinks the same when you close, when you build some house in Gilo, when you build something in the Golan under Israeli law. The world thinks the same because legally, if you don't accept the staying that Israel has the right to stay in the place, there is no difference.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming in. I guess we're going to just have to wait and see what happens.
You're welcome. I hope.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is fed up with Habayit HaYehudi leader Naftali Bennett. That's at least the view of political pundit Mitchell Barak, who told ILTV's Steve Leibowitz that the issue of the Amona settlement outpost could bring down the government.
Well, the issue of Amona might be something that ends the coalition, and there might be another party that comes in. I mean, certainly there's a lot of tension now between the Likud and the Bayit HaYehudi party, led by Naftali Bennett. So this may be his opportunity of kind of putting pressure within the government on Netanyahu, not knowing when Netanyahu is going to snap. At some point, Netanyahu may snap, and the legislation to, I call it the ammonia for Amona legislation, because it's supposed to whiten it up and clean it off and bleach it and make it official, even though the Supreme Court has ruled on it already. That's the kind of legislation that this government is trying to do. And it may be that Netanyahu has another party or parties in the wings that are ready to come in, because the Bayit HaYehudi party, led by Bennett, is not liked by a lot of the mainstream party, even within Likud. A lot of Likud people are feeling that there's too much pressure that Bennett is putting on, and he's playing petty politics. And petty politics are not good for a government and for a coalition to move.
It would seem unlikely that Bennett himself will back down on the Amona issue, because he is looked at as a leader, in effect, of the settlement movement. His entire political movement is based on his promise to strengthen the settlements. So would you say that if by December 25th a new law has not come into place, and the army tractors move in and begin leveling Amona, whether or not there's a clash on the ground or not, do you think that is the beginning of the end or the end of this coalition?
Well, he has to look like he's going down fighting. It's not necessarily that he has to win, but he has to put up a very good fight.
Bennett.
Naftali Bennett has to put up a very good fight and has to represent his constituency. The problem is that he comes from the most ideological and hardcore ideological constituency, and they've done a good job of boxing him in, just like they've boxed in every single party of the Beit Yehudi or the National Religious Party before it. They boxed him into an ideology, and if you look back historically, they've brought down governments because of these issues. So he's got to have to look like he's fighting, and it may not be exactly what we think, but there may be some compromise that's good enough for him to go back to his constituency and to sell them on and say, here, he's gotten something better. He's gotten increased housing in another location, and it's a Supreme Court, and we have to respect that, and therefore we're going to move those houses somewhere else, and we're going to add another 1,000 houses.
So would you say that on December 26th, Amona will no longer be there? Will it have been evacuated by then?
Well, it's hard to say because, you would think that if the Supreme Court, if it came to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court made a decision, that would be the end of the story in a country that values laws and in a country that values the court system. But here, that's the opening, really, for another possibility.
In addition to the deadline, is there any other reason right now? Is it because of the Trump election? He sees the cards having been shuffled in the United States and looking for a better deal with Washington?
Yes, well, there's a certain euphoria that's taken hold in a lot of these communities in Judea and Samaria by seeing, first of all, that Hillary Clinton was not elected. They thought that they would be getting more of President Obama and more of his policies towards the West Bank and towards the settlements. So first of all, she was not elected. And second of all, Donald Trump was elected. And that kind of throws everything into flux. And no one knows where that's going to lead, but it is seen in those circles that he will be more supportive or less vocal in opposition in building settlements, in Jews settling in these lands, and then to a certain extent emboldened to kind of test the system and push it. I have to remind you that a few days after the election, Netanyahu's office came out and told the ministers, hey, stop being so excited about Donald Trump's victory. We got to put some perspective on it and don't reach out to him directly.
And it was a point of confrontation with Bennett, because Bennett said right after the Trump election, well, that's the end of the idea of a Palestinian state. That's the end of the two-state solution. Let's move on.
Right. So I think Bennett sees this as the end of the Palestinian statehood or the two states movement. I think it's a little premature to say that because Trump has not taken office. President-elect Trump has not taken office. We don't even, we're still seeing who he's going to appoint Secretary of State, who are going to be the people that are fleshed out here in the Middle East. It's going to be interesting. And again, we know from political campaigns in Israel and in the U.S., what you say in a campaign is not what you're going to do when you govern. So let's see what happens when he takes office.
Mitchell Barak, thanks so much for being with us at ILTV.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of buzz over Israel's proposed law to lower the volume on Muslim call to prayer, which Jewish residents complain wake them up as well. But the leaders of two neighborhoods in Jerusalem are speaking out about how they're resolving the issue on their own. Aaron, let's face it, nobody wants to be interrupted while they're sleeping, whether it's a rooster, a call to prayer. So is this issue going to be worked out, or should it just not be an issue at all?
It's actually a really great question, just because, we saw how this started. This started with a law being proposed to outright quiet them down by force. And it wasn't really until last week when we started seeing President Rivlin, and now with a story that we'll see in a minute, but until President Rivlin came and sat down with some Jewish leaders, it doesn't sound like it had ever occurred to anybody to just ask their neighbors and discuss it with them. So
to just turn the volume down. But luckily, there are some people in the Middle East who can behave like adults and just talk it out, right? Let's check out what you did.
There's been a lot of buzz over Israel's proposed law to lower the volume of Muslim calls to prayer that Jewish residents complain wake them up too. But the leaders of two neighborhoods in Jerusalem are speaking out about how they're resolving the issue on their own. The ongoing dialogue between the Jewish residents of Gilo and their Arab neighbors in Beit Safafa has been going on for several years now. It started when the Jews explained that the noise problem really wasn't about religion, but rather that they were disturbed by the loud noise emanating from the mosque's minarets during the 5 daily Islamic calls to prayer. The Jewish residents were particularly upset that the first broadcast often awoke their families between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. The Muslims stressed that the centuries-old practice is considered a commandment from God, but they did acknowledge that the Quran also stresses importance of respecting one's neighbors. So ultimately, the 5 mosques in Beit Safafa agreed to use less powerful loudspeakers that will be directed away from Gilo. Neither side supports the proposed legislation, which would ban the use of loudspeakers by all religious institutions. The Jerusalem neighbors say that they share the view that politicians on both sides may be trying to exploit the issue for their own purposes, rather than in the best interest of all the people of Israel. Masa Israel is home to the widest variety of immersive international experiences for Jewish young adults 18 to 30. Find the right study abroad internship, service learning, or Jewish studies program to help you grow as a person, a professional, and a leader, while also developing a robust global professional network that includes Israelis and Jews from around the world.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We've recently been talking a lot about calls to prayer. Now, whether or not they're intrusive is up for debate, but no one is denying that they're definitely loud. So today's word of the day is ramkol, meaning loudspeaker. Ramkol describes not only a loudspeaker at the top of a minaret, but also the speaker function on your smartphone or the speakers you connect your instruments to, and any other kind of speaker that amplifies your sound. Ramkol is a combination of 2 words, ram, meaning high, and kol, meaning voice or sound. So literally, ramkol translates to loud sound. But switch those words around to kol ram, and now you don't just have a loudspeaker, but a speaker who's loud. So if you're on the phone and sound is hard to understand, you might say, torid oti mi ramkol, or take me off of speakerphone. But if you're just having a hard time hearing the person in the first place, you can say, tedaber bekol ram, or speak up. Either way, just try not to bother your neighbors. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 53 or 12 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect it to be partly cloudy again with a seasonal high of 69 or 21 degrees Celsius. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.82 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.